All right, guys. So I've been lurking around the internet and I've noticed that there's a bit of a conspicuous trend when it comes to some of the coverage of the Triumph Daytona 660. And that trend is that there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of following. If you look at any videos that are out there, you'll notice that the viewership, just the clicks and the actual number of views on those videos is really low by comparison to what you may expect or to see with other bikes that are out there. And I think I know the reason why. It's because of motorcycles like this. Guys, that is a 1998 Triumph Daytona T595. 955 cc's of raw British hot rod horsepower. But back then, this motorcycle was basically at the top of the food chain. Yes, there would be other motorcycles very soon to come after release of this bike. But that being said, this offered up, in essence, leader class torque with strong middleweight power. And it offered up, well, the one thing that this Daytona 660 isn't going to offer up, and that is top of the food chain level looks and performance. But here's the twist. This was at a time where open leader class bikes were a real thing. This is at the beginning of the 2000s, the dawning of these hyper performance motorcycles. The Daytona that would follow this motorcycle would have been at about 140 horsepower. And this is at a time when leader class bikes would have been doing well to be in that 140 to 160 horse range. With the triple offering up much more grunt down low, it offered up an alternative to the leader class hot rods from Japan, but it did so in a very unique way, had a unique sound, and they were all very fast. This is again at a point in time where, well, all motorcycles seem to do about 150 to 170 miles an hour, depending on gearing. I think you know where I'm going with this. Top of the food chain performance. It's difficult for some guys to wrap their heads around the idea that the Daytona name would be on any motorcycle that wasn't at the top of its class, at least at the top of a performance class. You see, after these T595 variants, and that's just a chassis designation, so the Triumph guys in the know will know what I'm talking about. But after the 955 era came the 675 era, the middleweight hyper sports darling that was the absolute king of the twisties and the canyons. Lots of down low grunt to get you through and out of a corner with plenty of over rev to keep up with and run with some bigger displacement bikes like the GSXR 750, and could also rip with the little guys around the corners from a flickability standpoint. It was, for many folks, the perfect motorcycle, with the absolute crowning achievement being the Daytona 765. But now we've been without a Daytona for a long time. Hyper middleweights and hyper leader class bikes just don't really seem to sell as well. It's difficult to get licensing in some parts of the planet, and so because of that, well, those motorcycles don't sell too many units. And let's be fair, they can be intimidating. And so where do you put a Daytona name? Which class can you be the top of and still fly that name proudly? Well, there is one class, and that's the entry-level sport bike class. Motorcycles like the CBR 650, the Ninja 650, the Tuono from a Prius 660, the R8. These motorcycles are all floating around that 75 to 95 horsepower range. They're fully fared, they're good-looking motorcycles, and they offer up a very sporting riding experience, but they don't confine you to a very hyper sport riding position. Plus, they check in around 2/3 the cost of some of those much more expensive hyper class bikes that are out there. But it kind of does beg a bit of a question, though. If the Daytona name is going to be associated with that class, what about and what do we do with the street triple? Because here's the thing, the Daytona has always been, at least since 1997, the Daytona. There weren't other variants of the Daytona. It was the Daytona. The T595, also known as a 955i, the 675. It was the Daytona. And the way that you can look at that is, well, you've got many variants of the street triple, the R, the RS, the Moto 2. And it's in the Moto 2 that a lot of folks really had their hopes up. You got to remember that Triumph is the provider for the engines for the Moto 2 race series. The Moto 2 motorcycles have a full fairing. They look like a Daytona. It shares the 675 chassis, 675 engine, really 765 engine now? How easy would it have been? But the problem again comes in sales. That type of motorcycle just does not sell well. Ask any dealer what kind of numbers that they're pushing of, well, the street triples, and you'll find that they just don't sell a lot of that motorcycle. Not a lot of that class does turn numbers, and it hasn't been that way historically for quite a long time. Really, over the last 20 years, there's been a continuous drop in sales of that class of motorcycle, but what's filling that void are the entry-level motorcycles that are both easier to get a license for, far easier to ride, and are much less intimidating out on the street. And it's the street performance that these motorcycles offer up in a way that the hyperclass bikes don't. They offer up lots of throttle response, tons of tip-in throttle response coming out of corners, and just in cruising down the highway. They're more into their power band at more reasonable RPM levels than those hyperclass motorcycles are. And as such, they offer up, in many ways, potentially a bit more of a rich riding experience once you get the things out on the road and you're working with the confines of what the street can offer. Not going crazy, not dragging a knee through every single apex, but just enjoying a very, very spirited ride around your favorite loop. That's where that entry-level sport bike comes into play. So factor in a lower price, because most of those motorcycles are checking in the low $9,000 to mid $9,000 range. Ease of power delivery, ease of power availability, much easier to ride at the rider's limit, and will also allow for a bit of a room to grow should that rider decide to branch off and start doing track days. That's really where you want to focus. And I get it. The Daytona being at the top of its food chain when it comes to a hyperclass, well, at least for the time being, that might be gone. And let's hope that the Daytona 660 can drive the kind of numbers that could help to fund a hopeful, maybe one day, 765 Daytona. Because we know what that would act like. The recipe's already there. Triumph, all you got to do is get to cooking. And with that, guys, I will leave you with this image of what is, in my opinion, one of the best looking motorcycles ever. The Triumph Daytona T595. That's a wrap, guys. Adios.